I was supposed to be the star of the evening until Dad cleared his throat and said, "Claire, step aside. Samantha has something to share." The room was bathed in the golden light of chandeliers, casting a warm glow over crystal glasses and polished silverware. From the corner seat where I sat beside Ethan, my fiancé, I could see the entire banquet table. Every face was familiar: family friends, company partners, a few distant cousins, and all of them I assumed were here for me. Not long ago, I used to walk into these gatherings with a silent spotlight on me. They used to say I had my father's brilliance, my mother's poise. I was the daughter who'd studied finance at Wharton, the one who sat through board meetings at 22, who poured coffee and took notes until I could chair them. So when Dad stood up, raised his glass and tapped it gently, I assumed this would be the moment. The moment we'd officially welcome Ethan to the family. The moment I'd be recognized as more than just a daughter, perhaps, as a future leader, a wife-to-be, a woman of value. Instead, he looked past me. "Claire," he said, his voice calm and rehearsed. "Step aside. Samantha has something to share." There was a pause, a stunned silence, as all eyes shifted from me to Samantha, who stood gracefully in a soft lavender dress that didn't dare outshine the white centerpiece bouquet in front of her. She smiled, just shy of smug. "Thank you, Dad." Samantha began clearing her throat with a dainty cough. "As of this quarter, I'll be stepping into a new role, Director of Financial Strategy. We've decided it's time to streamline operations, and I'll be consolidating oversight of all domestic branches." I blinked. Did she just say, all domestic branches? My fork clinked against the porcelain plate as I tried to make sense of it. That was supposed to be my department. I'd spent the last 3 years drafting policy reforms and cross-border compliance models. Samantha had been in PR until 6 months ago. Claire Ethan's voice barely rose above a whisper beside me, but he didn't look at me. His eyes were fixed on his wine glass, spinning the stem between his fingers. "Patricia." My mother offered no reaction. She sat still, her smile faint and unreadable. Her hands folded neatly on her lap like she was just another guest here, powerless, decorative. I turned to the only other person I hoped might feel as disoriented as I was, Mrs. McAllister, Ethan's mother. She was watching Samantha intently, but then turned her gaze to me, puzzled, as if to ask, "Did you know?" "No, I didn't." Dad took over again. "Claire will be stepping away from day-to-day operations. It's best she takes time off for her health, her well-being. These past few years have been demanding." A ripple of polite nods and raised brows spread through the table. My hands were frozen in my lap, fingers curled tightly under the linen napkin, digging into the cloth like it could anchor me. I wanted to scream. I wanted to laugh. I wanted Ethan to say something, anything, but he stayed silent. "I think this is a wonderful direction," Samantha continued. "It's not about replacing anyone, it's about evolving. Together." She smiled at me with that kind of sisterly warmth that only hides poison. I nodded slowly, every movement measured, afraid that if I moved too fast, something inside me would crack audibly. "I'm so proud of you," I said, because that's what I was supposed to say. Because I didn't want to cause a scene. Because apparently this had all been decided long before I walked in, wearing my best dress, thinking tonight would be my night. I smiled, but I could feel my heart cracking slowly, methodically, like someone had planned it that way. "Do you know what failure looks like in our family? It looks like me packaging boxes while Samantha sits on a board." The warehouse smelled like cardboard tape and silent humiliation. I stood between stacks of inventory crates dressed in slacks and a company polo that was too tight across the shoulders, the name Whitmore Logistics embroidered neatly on the chest like some cruel joke. Just a week ago, my name was printed on reports bound for board meetings. Now I was signing off on shipment receipts and managing late forklifts. This wasn't a sabbatical. This was exile. As I printed out the next set of inventory barcodes, I thought back to when I was 10, holding my father's briefcase as he walked me through our company's first Boston warehouse. He'd said, "One day, Claire, this will all be yours. You think differently, like me." Now Samantha sat where I used to, and I was here. She had visited me earlier this morning, heels clacking on the concrete floor, sunglasses still on despite being indoors. "You really shouldn't beat yourself up," she said sweetly, voice laced with synthetic sympathy. "Not everyone's cut out for leadership. Some of us bloom under pressure. Others, well..." She paused, gave me that trademark Samantha smile. "Others contribute in their own way." Then she waved at the clipboard in my hands and left, as if she had delivered a blessing. I stared at my phone. Still no message from Ethan. Still no response to the 3 texts I'd sent since the dinner. I told myself he might be busy. That maybe he didn't know what to say. That lie didn't last long. Later that evening, I returned home to find the family gathered at the dining room table. The roast had been carved, the wine poured. Patricia sat in her usual seat, poised and elegant the way she'd always been, hands folded in her lap, eyes lowered just enough to seem serene, detached. "Sit," Donald said simply, not looking at me. Dinner passed like a courtroom proceeding. No one raised their voice. No one offered kindness. It was all stabs dressed as statements. "You could have made it," Claire Donald said, cutting his steak with surgical precision. "But you lack follow-through. You've always lacked it." "I thought I was the one you were grooming for the role," I replied, my voice quiet, brittle. "You said I thought like you." "Thinking isn't enough," he snapped. "Leadership means instinct, adaptability, not just numbers on a page." Across the table, Samantha sipped her wine with the kind of casualness that only comes from knowing no one would ever question your presence. "And Ethan," I asked before I could stop myself, "has anyone heard from him?" The silence that followed was far too quick, too familiar. Patricia looked at her napkin. Samantha didn't even blink. When I returned to the warehouse the next day, I found a message blinking on the old desktop monitor assigned to my temporary desk, an internal team chat notification from Samantha. Likely meant for someone else. Or maybe not. "Claire's like a shadow now." "Good. That's where she does the least harm." I stared at it for a long time. My fingers hovered above the keyboard, but I didn't reply. Instead, I leaned back, listening to the hum of machinery, the distant beeping of a reversing forklift, and the voice in my head repeating the same question over and over. I started to wonder, had they planned this all along together? Ethan's silence was louder than any betrayal. I arrived at the conference room 15 minutes early. Not because I had anything to prove, but because it felt like I needed to remind them that I still existed. The Whitmore quarterly shareholder check-in was supposed to be a minor meeting, but I had attended every one since I was 25. I had helped build the reporting format they used. I had led it for the past 2 years. The room was bright, sterile, and strangely cold. No one looked up when I walked in. Not Samantha, already seated and scrolling through her iPad. Not Donald reviewing a folder while murmuring something to the CFO. Not even Ethan, who stood by the sideboard pouring himself coffee. I hesitated near an empty seat at the back, unsure if I should sit. Finally, I pulled the chair back quietly and took my place. No one acknowledged me. "Hey," I whispered when Ethan passed by, tray in hand. He looked at me, then looked away. "Let's not make this dramatic," he said under his breath, tone clipped, almost rehearsed. I blinked. "Excuse me," but he was already moving towards Samantha, handing her the mug like it was second nature. As more board members filtered in, mostly younger associates, some of whom I'd trained myself, not a single one made eye contact. It was like I had slipped into an alternate version of the company, one where I was a ghost haunting a meeting I used to lead. Samantha cleared her throat, voice polished and confident. Thanks everyone for coming on short notice. We've made several structural shifts in the past 2 weeks, and I'm excited to walk you through our Q4 strategic objectives. Donald nodded. We're lucky to have such forward-thinking leadership at the helm. Samantha is proving to be more than just capable, she's the future of Whitmore Holdings. I bit my lips so hard I tasted blood. When the presentation began, I tried to follow, but my vision blurred around the edges. My breathing slowed. Every time I raised my eyes, I caught someone pointedly not looking back. At one point, Ethan leaned over to say something to Samantha, who laughed quietly, her hand brushing his arm. I didn't know what burned worse, the humiliation or the numbness. Minutes dragged on like hours. Finally, when the last slide faded from the projector, I stood. My voice cut through the silence like a dropped glass. Is anyone going to ask why I'm no longer on the board? The room froze. Then deliberately Donald closed his folder. No one spoke. Samantha turned to adjust the volume on the conference speaker, pretending she hadn't heard. One board member took a sip of water. Another glanced at his phone. I asked a question, I said again, louder this time. Still nothing. Not even Ethan. I sat down not because I gave up, but because the weight of pretending I still belonged was heavier than I expected. When the meeting ended, everyone exited quickly, murmuring about flights, traffic, upcoming audits, anything but me. Samantha walked out with Donald. Ethan lingered behind for a moment but never looked back. I went home early. I didn't turn on the lights. I sat by the window for what felt like hours. That night, Ethan didn't come home. You think losing everything is sudden? It's not. It happens one silence at a time. I used to think betrayal came with shouting, slammed doors, and accusations hurled like grenades. But that's not how it happens in my family. Here it arrives in carefully timed pauses, half-closed doors, and phrases like, "Let's move on," or "Let's not dwell." Dinner at my father's house was supposed to be casual, a routine family gathering, nothing more. But I knew better now. Nothing was casual anymore. Especially not when Patricia arranged the table with her polished silverware, and the seating felt more like a chessboard than a family meal. I was placed at the far end next to a window overlooking the garden. Samantha sat beside Donald like a prized heir. Ethan took the seat beside her without hesitation. Patricia filled the water glasses herself, not once looking at me as she did. The roast was perfect. The wine was expensive. The conversation was cold. So Claire, Donald said as he sliced into his meat. "How's the warehouse treating you?" I met his eyes, refusing to flinch. "It's temporary. I've been exploring a new project, something more aligned with my background in behavioral finance. There's potential to build a platform that connects underserved entrepreneurs with micro-investment tools. I've been drafting the framework." I saw Ethan stiffen slightly. Samantha stopped swirling her wine. Donald raised an eyebrow. "Sounds like a passion project." "It's a business model," I said firmly. "It has legs. If given proper backing." Claire, he interrupted, voice even. "Your problem is that you always mistake art for architecture. Not everything you sketch deserves a budget." I opened my mouth, but Ethan cut in. "Claire, maybe this isn't the time to pitch ideas. We're trying to have dinner." His voice was calm, but the implication landed hard. Not now. Not here. Not in front of them. I turned to Samantha, who was already smiling. "Maybe you need to find yourself, Claire," she said, as if offering spiritual advice. "Take a sabbatical. Travel. Get away from all this pressure. Some people flourish when they step back." "I'm not stepping back," I snapped. "Sure you are," she replied sweetly. "You just haven't accepted it yet." Patricia looked up from her plate. For a moment, just a second, her eyes met mine and something passed between us. A flicker of discomfort. Of knowing. She opened her mouth slightly as if about to say something, but then nothing. Her lips closed. Her gaze dropped. And in that silence, I finally understood. She wasn't going to intervene. She never was. She had accepted this design long ago. I looked around the table. Donald dissecting his steak like it was business strategy. Samantha smug and polished. Ethan quiet, complicit. Patricia absent in presence. There was no place for me here. There never had been. I finished my wine in one long, slow sip. My throat burned, not from the alcohol, but from what I refused to cry. When dessert came, I declined. I stood up, excused myself without a word, and left through the side door, my heels echoing against the polished marble floors. Outside, the Boston air had cooled. Leaves were turning. The wind felt sharper than before. I used to ask why. Why me? Why now? Why did they stop loving me as I was? But that night, I stopped asking why. I started planning how. They thought I would break. I bent instead. The afternoon sun poured into the cafe windows, softening the sharp October air outside. It was the kind of cozy New England place I used to avoid, too slow, too quaint, too ordinary. But now I welcomed the quiet. It gave me room to breathe, to think, to be unseen. I was halfway through a lukewarm cappuccino when someone slid into the seat across from me. Claire Whitmore, he said, his voice warm with surprise. I blinked. It took me a second to recognize him, beard a little fuller, lines a little deeper, but the same steady eyes. Mark Harrington, former lead architect on the East Point Initiative, the one my father had praised in meetings, and quietly pushed out when the project restructured. I hadn't seen him in years. Mark, I said slowly. Wow. It's been 3 years. Since the zoning meeting. You tore into the city council like a litigator. I laughed, surprised at myself. They tried to greenlight a parking lot over a heritage garden. And you made a case for butterflies. Damn effective, too. He sipped his coffee, eyes studying me. Didn't expect to see you out here. Didn't expect to be here, I replied. Something in my tone must have lingered because he leaned in slightly. I heard about what happened. Samantha's rise. Your sudden absence. Family restructure? I said with a shrug, trying for humor and failing. He paused. You know she nearly lost us that rezoning deal, right? Gave a presentation with the wrong set of blueprints. I had to fix it behind the scenes. I stared. You never said anything. Didn't get the chance. Donald called me the next day and said the board wasn't comfortable with my leadership. Code for keep your mouth shut or get buried. It stung even now. But oddly, the sting didn't paralyze, it focused. They always said mistakes were learning opportunities, I muttered. Just not for me. What are you working on now? He asked. I hesitated. Then I reached into my tote and pulled out a rough sketch, a framework drawn on napkins and receipt backs, held together by stubbornness and sleepless nights. A space for teens who feel lost. STEM learning, creative therapy, mentorship. Kids like me when I was 12, building model houses out of popsicle sticks while everyone else played soccer. Mark studied the drawing. You always had that brain. Structure and soul. It's rare. I shrugged. It's just an idea. It's a good one, he said. And I want in. I looked up sharply. I'll do the design pro bono. Site plan, zoning, research, permits, everything. On one condition. I raised an eyebrow. You lead it. Publicly. No more shadows. For a moment the familiar fear crept in. What if I failed again? What if they laughed? But I remembered Samantha's smirk. Donald's dismissive tone. Ethan's silence. They didn't think I could rebuild. That was their first mistake. I'm not just going to recover, I'm going to build. Mark grinned. Damn right you are. As we packed up, a former intern, someone I vaguely remembered from my days in the office, walked past our table. She gave me a small nod, subtle but knowing. Almost like she was glad to see me upright. Outside, the wind picked up, tossing leaves into mini whirlwinds. And this time, they'd have to watch from the outside. Revenge doesn't begin with fire. It starts with a folder in the mailbox. The rain had been falling all morning, steady gray, persistent. It clung to the window panes like a fogged memory, muting the usual Boston clatter outside. My apartment smelled of old paper-strong coffee and the lavender-scented candle I kept burning just to ward off the creeping sense of limbo. I had carved out this new space for myself, but pieces of the old world still knocked at the door, sometimes literally. The knock today came at noon. I opened the door to find no one, just a padded envelope resting neatly on my doormat. No return address, no markings, only my name in block letters, Claire. I brought it inside, carefully slicing it open with the edge of a butter knife. Inside a slim manila folder. I hesitated, then pulled it free. Balance sheets, account transfers, a stream of company records dating back 2 years. At first glance, it looked like nothing, just dull numbers and corporate footnotes. But then my eyes caught the pattern. Funds routed through subsidiaries that didn't exist 2 months later. Consultant fees to shell companies with no digital footprint. Names I didn't recognize yet, the signatures matched, and all of it linked subtly but unmistakably to Whitmore Group Holdings. My heart thudded. This wasn't just sloppy bookkeeping, it was laundering. And someone wanted me to know. I stared at the folder, half expecting it to vanish. Then the doorbell chimed again. Not the physical one, but the metaphoric kind, my phone buzzing with a notification. A voicemail. Unknown number. I hit play. Claire. It's Mom. I don't know if this will even reach you, but I've been thinking about that night at the restaurant. Your face when your father told you to step aside. I wanted to say something, God, I did. But I froze. I always freeze around him. I'm sorry. She paused, voice trembling. You should know. Years ago, Donald used to call you his golden promise. Showed your science fair trophies to everyone like they were stock certificates. But then, Samantha came back from Europe suddenly. It was as if you never existed. I don't understand him anymore. I just hope you're okay. Really okay. The message ended. I didn't realize I was holding my breath until my lungs demanded air. My fingers gripped the phone too tightly. It wasn't a confession, but it was the first sliver of humanity I'd gotten from my mother in years. And it came wrapped in guilt. I dialed Mark immediately. You won't believe what just landed in my lap, I said, explaining the folder in rapid detail. There was a long silence on the other end. That's it, he said finally. I've seen that data before. The originals. I flagged it a year ago, but your father's legal team sent me a cease and desist so fast I didn't even have time to blink. I figured I was outmatched. Then someone else got their hands on it, I murmured. Or someone wants justice more than they want safety, Mark replied. I laid the folder out on my kitchen table, spreading the pages like tarot cards. I'm not just building a project, I'm building a case. We spoke for another hour. Mark walked me through, decoding the records, identifying weak spots, establishing a timeline. My apartment transformed into a war room, sticky notes blooming across my wall like strategic weeds. By late afternoon, the rain had become a mist. I made myself a second pot of coffee, stared at the burner until it clicked off, then grabbed my phone. I hesitated only for a moment. Then I scrolled until I found the name. Ethan Reynolds. The man who'd walked away in silence. The man who'd once promised forever. My thumb hovered, then pressed. I called a name I hadn't dialed in years, Ethan. You can't unsee the truth once someone dares to show it to you. The lobby of Ethan's office smelled like leather and lemon polish, clinical polished, soulless. The kind of place where people smiled with their teeth, but never their eyes. I hadn't been here in months. Not since I was still Claire Whitmore, fiancé, future board member, supposed heir. Now I was a guest, barely that. I signed in with the receptionist, ignoring the flash of recognition in her eyes, and waited. When the elevator opened, I stepped in without looking back. Ethan's assistant tried to mask her surprise. He's in meetings all afternoon. He'll want to see me, I interrupted, handing her a thin envelope. This just needs a signature. I can wait. I took a seat by the window. Outside, Boston's late November sky was the color of brushed steel. Cold light filtered in, catching on the gold trim of the room. The longer I waited, the more I realized how far this world had shifted without me, and how little I missed it. 15 minutes passed before Ethan emerged. He didn't smile, didn't scowl either, just froze. I just need your signature on some old paperwork, I said evenly, holding up a manila folder. He took it without a word, flipping through out of habit. There's a USB inside, I added casually. Just facts. You decide. His eyes flicked up, confusion sharpening into wariness. What is this? Not an ambush, I said. I'm past that stage. Think of it as context. He didn't invite me in, didn't ask how I was, just nodded stiffly and turned to go. I left the building without looking back, my heels clicking across the marble like a countdown. Later that evening, I knew he'd watched it. The data wasn't complicated. A trail of account movements, unassuming at first glance. Investment accounts opened under Ethan's name, seeded by trust funds meant for joint ventures. Slowly, quietly redirected to companies newly registered under Samantha's management, each one a siphon, nothing illegal on the surface, just immoral enough to feel like betrayal. Especially if the person you trusted loved was the one pulling the strings. My phone stayed quiet, but silence had a new meaning now. It didn't feel like defeat. It felt like fermentation, something brewing, swelling, growing legs. I imagined Ethan at his desk staring at his screen, heart thudding, remembering Samantha's evasive answers, the vague paperwork, his own initials next to transactions he never approved. He'd start asking questions. The next morning, I sat at a coffee shop 2 blocks from his building, nursing a lukewarm cappuccino. I didn't need confirmation, but I got it anyway. Across the street, Ethan leaned against his black Audi face, pale phone to his ear. No, Sam, he said louder than necessary. I'm not accusing. I'm asking for answers. Why would investments under my name end up in Axiom Holdings? You said those companies didn't exist anymore. He listened, jaw tightening. I just think we need to talk. Now. In person. Then he hung up, slid into the driver's seat, and sat there unmoving. I didn't wave. I didn't gloat. I simply sipped my coffee and watched the first ripple hit the surface of a very still pond. I had dropped the stone. Now came the echoes. And for the first time, I heard panic in his voice. Justice, like architecture, begins with foundation no one sees. The hall smelled of fresh paint and polished ambition. Rows of plastic chairs faced a modest podium, behind which a banner read, "Rebuild Boston, a community reimagined." To anyone walking in, it looked like just another local project announcement, small budget, hopeful faces, nothing threatening. But this wasn't just a project, it was a declaration. I straightened the cuffs of my blazer, calming the nervous flutter in my chest. Mark gave me a reassuring nod from behind the projector setup. In the front row, a few curious reporters scribbled on notepads, clearly expecting some heartwarming fluff piece about neighborhoods and playgrounds. Let them underestimate me. That was part of the design. Thank you all for coming, I began, voice steady. This isn't just about buildings. Rebuild Boston is about dignity. It's about creating spaces where forgotten communities, especially young people, can find direction, identity, and hope. Slides clicked behind me. Images of rundown buildings in Dorchester, children playing near boarded-up lots, mocked-up designs of green rooftops and solar panels. We'll be partnering with public schools, local trade unions, and volunteer architects to repurpose these spaces sustainably. Every build, every beam will have student hands on it. There were polite nods, a few raised eyebrows. I spotted a representative from the city council jotting something with unusual intensity. I let the pause settle before adding, "The Whitmore Foundation is proud to sponsor this initiative." There it was, a flicker across a reporter's face. Whitmore. The name still carried weight. That evening, the story ran in 3 small outlets. The next day, 5. By the end of the week, it was in the Boston Globe's City Forward column. The headlines weren't explosive yet, but the implications simmered. Disgraced heiress returns with new mission. Whitmore daughter shifts gears from fortune to foundation. It was just enough. Enough for whispers to begin in backrooms between minor shareholders. Enough for Samantha to notice. She showed up uninvited at the second community roundtable, storming through the modest recreation center in stilettos like she was inspecting a crime scene. Her expression was pure fury masked in lip gloss and Burberry. "You're doing this just to spite me," she hissed as we stepped aside, her smile brittle for the watching eyes. I held her gaze calm. "No, I'm doing it because you forgot who I was." The room fell silent for a beat. Even the kids behind the juice table paused. She blinked. The Samantha Whitmore master of retorts, queen of staged poise, stood there speechless. It was small, almost imperceptible, but I saw at the edge of her confidence fray. Outside, Mark joined me under the awning where rain had just begun to fall. "She's rattled," he said. I didn't respond. I didn't need to. The foundation was laid quiet, firm, unshakable. For once, I wasn't the one reacting. I was the one building. And for once, she didn't have a comeback. Sometimes, betrayal hides in the words you don't hear. The apartment was quiet, save for the soft hum of the heater battling the December frost. Ethan sat alone on the couch, the television flickering static behind him forgotten. Snow tapped gently against the window panes like a metronome to his spiraling thoughts. His phone vibrated once, twice. A message. He glanced at it, barely interested. Then he read it. "Samantha Claire's just a pathetic old draft. I'm the real deal." For a moment he didn't move. Then he read it again. And again. And again, until the bile rose in his throat like some unspoken truth, finally clawing its way out. The message was meant for her friend he knew. Probably a screenshot of some victory. Probably a toast over wine at his expense. He put the phone down, stood up, and began pacing. The shadows in the room seemed to tilt with him. He opened his desk drawer, one he hadn't touched in months, and pulled out the folder Claire had once asked him to look into. The one he'd dismissed with a wave, with a coward's shrug. Investment breakdowns, transfers, signatures. His own name on documents that now smelled of rot. She'd used him. Claire had warned him without ever accusing him. That alone cut deeper. Ethan leaned over the kitchen sink, breathing hard. The faucet dripped like a metronome of guilt. He reached for his phone again. This time, he didn't hesitate. "Claire," he said the moment she picked up. "We need to talk. I've been a coward." A pause. He could hear a shuffle, maybe papers, maybe her holding her breath. "I know. I saw Samantha's texts, the things she's said. I think I've been part of something I didn't even understand." Her voice came through steady, colder than he remembered. "Are you switching sides or just switching guilt?" He flinched. "Maybe both." Silence again. Then Claire sighed, weary and sharp at once. "You don't get to play the wounded now, Ethan." "I'm not asking for redemption," he replied. "I'm asking for a chance. One day. Just give me one day." She didn't say yes. She didn't say no. She hung up. Later that night, Ethan pulled out every document he could find. Tax returns, meeting notes, emails from Samantha's account that she'd forwarded to him, never thinking twice. Each paper felt like a confession in his hands. He wasn't going to be a hero. But maybe he could stop being a pawn. "Give me a day. I'll prove I still have a spine." Weddings are for promises. Ours was built on silence. The ballroom shimmered with crystal chandeliers and careful illusions. Golden ribbons framed towering arrangements of white roses. Strings played in the background, Vivaldi for, I think, while photographers circled like polite vultures, waiting for the perfect shot. The engagement party of Ethan Whitmore and Samantha Whitmore had drawn nearly everyone who mattered in Boston's elite circles. Politicians, business tycoons, and society columnists, all sipping champagne, all basking in the glow of a union no one had truly questioned. Except me. I stood near the back of the room just behind the second tier of tables in a sleek black dress that didn't try to compete with Samantha's couture. I didn't need to. In my hand was a single ivory envelope. Ethan spotted me first. His smile faltered. He was standing next to Samantha, who was giving a toast to the strength of legacy and love. Her voice rang out polished and rehearsed, as if she'd spent weeks memorizing lines meant to solidify her as the new queen of the Whitmore Empire. I stepped forward as she finished her final sentence. "Excuse me," I said, calm and steady. The room hushed. I approached Ethan directly. The cameras turned. The murmurs spread like smoke. "This is for you," I said, offering the envelope. He didn't take it right away. "Ethan," I repeated, "you asked for 1 day. It's been more than enough." He reached out, took it, and opened it with hands that trembled more than he expected. Inside, printouts of loan applications, wire transfers, email headers, all bearing Ethan's name but none authorized by him. All of them funneled into shell companies under Samantha's name, risky, illegal, and traceable. He read quickly. The silence around us was thick, unbreathable. When he looked up, his eyes were no longer clouded. He turned to the crowd, voice clear. "These documents show financial misconduct under my name. I did not approve any of these transactions." A gasp echoed through the room. Samantha stepped forward. "Ethan, what are you doing?" she hissed. Her voice cracked. "You said these companies didn't exist anymore." He replied louder. "You said I didn't need to know." Photographers surged forward, lenses flashing. Someone at the press table began scribbling furiously. Donald's face was red, jaw clenched so tight I thought his teeth might crack. He moved toward the stage, but Patricia rose before he could speak. She walked slowly, deliberately. Her heels clicked against marble like punctuation. Then, in front of 200 guests and half the Boston media circuit, she took my hand. "My daughter deserves better," she said. Her voice was soft, but every microphone caught it. "From all of us." Samantha stared at her, stunned. Donald looked like he might explode. And Ethan, he just stood there, speechless. Samantha turned on her heel and bolted from the stage, knocking over a centerpiece on her way out. Red wine spilled like blood on ivory linens. I didn't follow. I didn't need to. The whispers had begun. Not in back rooms now, but out in the open where they could breathe and multiply. And just like that, the engagement was over, but the war had just begun. I wasn't invited to the board meeting. I came anyway and brought company. The polished glass doors of the Whitmore Court boardroom were meant to intimidate, transparent enough to see who sat in judgment, solid enough to remind you who wasn't allowed in. I pushed them open without knocking. 20 heads turned. Donald sat at the head of the table, flanked by Samantha on one side and 2 younger board members on the other. Ethan was there too, toward the far end, back stiff, expression unreadable. An assistant whispered urgently into a headset, but no one moved to stop me. I stepped forward, heels clicking with a rhythm I'd rehearsed for days. In my hand was a small USB drive. In my chest, a heart pounding not with fear, but with purpose. "I believe this meeting concerns shareholder trust," I said, dropping the USB onto the table with a soft thud. "You'll want to plug that in." Donald leaned back. "Claire, this isn't your place anymore." "That's what you decided," I replied. "Not the shareholders. And certainly not the auditors." There was a flicker of unease as one of the compliance officers, Ms. Danning, I remembered, gestured to a tech assistant. The screen behind them lit up. Balance sheets, transfer records, overlapping entries, falsified vendor contracts. Mark's voice crackled through a video call window. I oversaw the original budget for the Redwood project. These numbers have been doctored, entries were altered post-approval. Samantha stiffened. That's not those figures were passed through a third-party accountant. Ms. Danning cleared her throat. We've cross-referenced these with filings from 2 years ago. There are clear signs of internal misreporting. Donald's jaw tensed. I didn't stop. Let's play something, I said, tapping my phone. A voice recording began, muffled at first, then unmistakably clear. Samantha's voice. Claire won't touch this. She's too broken to try. Gasps echoed around the room. A few board members shifted uncomfortably. One scribbled something on his notepad. I looked straight at my sister, who had gone pale. She's bluffing, Samantha snapped. That could have been edited. It wasn't, Ethan said quietly. I verified it myself. Samantha turned on him, her expression wounded. You were supposed to be on my side. I was, he said. Until I realized I didn't know what side that was anymore. I felt the weight of the moment settle, but I didn't gloat. This wasn't the end. It wasn't even the climax, but it was a fracture deep and visible. Donald leaned forward, lips parted as if to speak, but no words came. I watched him waiting. He looked at me then, at the documents spread across the table, and said nothing. The room fell silent. For the first time, Dad didn't speak for her. Truth doesn't just shine, it burns. The conference room wasn't the boardroom this time. It was smaller, darker, windowless. No champagne, no string quartet. Just the cold echo of truth about to land. The internal hearing had been scheduled quietly under the guise of an audit review. Yet somehow, mysteriously, inevitably, a camera recording from the corner would find its way into the hands of a local investigative journalist. But that was a story for later. Today the doors clicked shut behind me. Samantha sat stiffly across the table, her once impeccable posture now brittle. Her lipstick was too sharp, too red. Donald stared straight ahead, unreadable, a statue carved from arrogance and habit. The panel of internal auditors and 2 senior board members looked grim, folders thick with evidence open before them. I placed a slim file in front of the committee. Our legal team reviewed these. Over the past week, said Mr. Harrow, head of compliance. Documents were provided by Mr. Ethan Ward confirming that a loan issued under his name, without full disclosure, was funneled into a shell company traced back to Ms. Samantha Whitmore. Samantha let out a strained laugh. This is a witch hunt. No, Ethan's voice came from the corner, quiet but steady. It's a reckoning. A projection lit the far wall, showing signatures. Ethan's, Samantha's, Donald's. Donald shifted. The financial review team handles the vetting. You signed off, Harrow interrupted. Samantha folded her arms. Why are you asking me? Dad ran everything through his team. He told me how to move the capital. I didn't even want the Redwood deal. The silence fractured. Donald blinked. That's not true. You made me do it, Samantha snapped, rising from her chair, her voice high, unhinged. You said Claire couldn't handle the pressure. That the family legacy needed someone ruthless. So I did what you wanted. Donald's mouth opened, but no words followed. Patricia stood up. Everyone turned. Her voice was low, but every syllable landed like a hammer. I told you 10 years ago she'd burn this family down. You didn't listen. Samantha spun toward her. You were never part of this. No, Patricia said. I chose not to be. The auditors exchanged glances. One leaned toward Harrow and whispered. Samantha's hands trembled. I didn't speak. I didn't have to. I watched the empire unravel one accusation at a time. Donald's silence was more damning than any document. Samantha looked between us all, mother, father, sister, and for the first time, she was truly alone. That's when I knew I didn't have to destroy them. They'd do it themselves. Reputation dies faster than truth travels. When the news broke, it didn't drip, it roared. By Monday morning, Whitmore Corp's polished facade was splashed across every major business outlet and social feed. Whitmore Dynasty in Freefall Fraud Family Fallout. Underneath the headlines, images of Samantha's panicked outburst and Donald's frozen silence at the hearing played in a continuous loop dissected frame by frame on late-night talk shows. Donald once said, "We're an empire. Public opinion is noise." Now the noise had teeth. The board moved fast. Within 72 hours, an emergency meeting was called. Donald was officially suspended from his role as chairman pending further investigation. His authority, once absolute, was handed temporarily to Meredith Fox, a sharp, principled executive who had always regarded me with cautious respect. I'd never heard her raise her voice. She didn't need to. Samantha, meanwhile, vanished from social media. Her once curated feeds, luxury vacations, business panels, designer gowns went dark. Bloggers dug into her past deals. Every smile in every archived post now looked like a smirk. I didn't gloat. I simply watched. The phone rang. Ethan. I almost didn't answer, but curiosity won. He wasn't calling to apologize. "Claire," he said, "if you were after revenge, you've got it. Samantha's toxic. Donald's neutered. The empire's bleeding." I said nothing. "If you're looking for peace, I hope you find that too." Peace. I thought of Patricia, who'd walked into the courthouse with her head high and emerged without a word. The divorce papers were filed clean and silent. Her name was off the trust, off the foundation. She had chosen her own ending. I thought of Donald pacing in his office behind drawn blinds, wondering how it all spiraled. Of Samantha hiding behind lawyers and silences no longer trending. And I thought of the child version of me building matchstick palaces only to watch them crushed under indifference. The woman I had become wasn't seeking revenge anymore. I didn't want peace. I wanted clarity, and now I had it. After the fall, there's silence, then choice. The early spring air still held the edge of winter. My boots sank slightly into the damp earth as I walked the rows of unfinished foundations. Some walls had gone up, bare bones of homes yet to be. Children's chalk scribbles marked the cement slabs like blessings in disguise, crooked hearts, uneven names, suns with 12 rays, life in its most unfiltered form. Jordan spotted me first, 8 years old, sharp as glass, soft as moss. He'd lost both parents before he could memorize their voices. "Miss Claire," he called, tugging at my sleeve. "Why aren't you mad all the time?" I blinked at the question. The child had no filter, no agenda, just curiosity carved into skin. I crouched beside him. "Because being mad forever makes you heavy. I need to stay light if I'm going to build things." He considered that. "Like these houses," I smiled. "Exactly like these." Jordan nodded, satisfied. Then he dashed off, chasing a plastic bottle like it was a trophy. Mark approached from the community tent, sleeves rolled up, clipboard under his arm. "The city just approved Phase 2, he said. "And you've got visitors." I turned. Patricia stood at the edge of the plot, looking smaller than I remembered. Not fragile, just human. She didn't wave, she didn't smile. But she walked forward slowly, as if crossing years, not meters. I showed her the outline of the first home, where the classrooms would go, where the garden wall would rise. She touched one of the newly laid bricks. "I don't need you to explain," she said quietly. "I'm not angry anymore," I replied. We stood there a long moment, just breathing. Later, Mark handed me an envelope. "They want you back, Claire," he said. "The board. You can reclaim your shares, hell, even a seat. Meredith's willing to sponsor it. But they need your word. You'll have to return." I looked around. The place I had built without their permission, without their blueprint. The laughter of kids. The quiet strength of concrete. The future humming beneath the soil. I'm not sure the boardroom is where I belong anymore. Mark tilted his head. "Maybe not. Or maybe it needs someone like you now." The sun dipped behind the skeletal frame of what would be a library. I pressed a hand to the final cornerstone still warm from daylight. Maybe it's time to build something that lasts. And maybe this time I won't build it alone. Forgiveness isn't weakness. It's the luxury of the victorious. The sun filtered through the rows of new windows, casting golden angles on polished floors and freshly painted walls. Music drifted from a nearby speaker, something upbeat, hopeful. The kind of tune people sway to without realizing. Children giggled as they dashed around the new courtyard, their footsteps echoing on stone I'd once only imagined. Banners waved in the soft April breeze: Whitmore Foundation Rebuild, Boston Rebuild Trust. I stood behind the podium as the mayor finished her remarks. Cameras blinked red. Reporters leaned forward. But it wasn't pressure I felt. It was ease. The kind that comes when you've already paid the price, and you know no one can repossess your peace. I used to think justice meant punishment, I began. But sometimes justice is building something no one can tear down, not with lies, not with power, not with bloodlines. I looked toward the first row where Patricia sat beside Mark, her hands folded, her expression unreadable but calm. Mark gave me a thumbs up, subtle but sincere. We've all lost something, I continued. Money, trust, time. But if there's one thing no one should lose, it's the belief that they matter. This place, I gestured to the buildings behind me, exists to remind every child, every family that their future isn't limited by someone else's greed. Applause followed, not thunderous but warm, real. Later, away from the cameras, a woman from the board approached. "The seat is still yours, Claire. We believe the company needs your vision." I smiled. "That's kind of you. But I think it's time the company learns to walk without the Whitmore name as a crutch. I'll support from afar, but I won't return." She nodded. "They'll be surprised." I turned toward the playground. Good. Let them be. As the crowd began to thin, I noticed Ethan leaning against a column watching. He waited for me to come over, then said, "You didn't have to be gracious today." "I didn't have to survive either," I replied. "But I did." He looked like he wanted to say something else, maybe an apology, maybe an excuse. But I didn't need it. "Thank you," I said instead, "for not ruining everything." He nodded quietly, understanding that this was the final page between us. Just as I was about to leave, my phone buzzed. A message from an unfamiliar number. "We watched your speech. We'd like to fund your next project. Let's talk." I slipped the phone into my pocket, heart steady. There would be more to build. Not for revenge, not for redemption, but because creation was its own form of power. And this time I wouldn't start from ruins. Maybe this story began with betrayal, but it ends with my name, not theirs. After the storm of betrayal and the quiet rebuilding that followed, justice didn't roar, it revealed itself slow and undeniable. Claire didn't destroy her enemies. She simply stood tall while they collapsed under the weight of their own deceit. Like the final chord of a long-forgotten melody, justice may arrive late, but it resonates powerfully once it's heard. Sometimes it only takes one woman saying enough to unravel an empire built on silence. Like if this ending struck a chord, share if you believe truth always finds its voice, and comment below. 1. If you felt empowered by Claire's journey. 2. If you think she deserved more.